All right, welcome back. We're going to cover here kind of quickly the compressed gas cylinder safety PowerPoint. It says here industrial manufacturing, repair shops, fabrication shops, construction operations. All these require the use of compressed gases for a variety of different operations. You really can't go into any type of industrial setting and not find compressed gases of some sort. So that's why we're covering this topic today. Your compressed gases present a number of hazards. The gases could be flammable or combustible, explosive, corrosive, poisonous, or inert, and that's where an inert gas will push oxygen out of an atmosphere and could cause someone to suffocate, or it could be any combination of those hazards. And gases can tend to have a very low flash point depending on what kind of gas that it is. Things like hydrogen, those are highly flammable and have a very low flash point. These gases normally have a high diffusion rate because they are so concentrated, and once they start to escape, they can fill up especially a small space fairly quickly. The higher concentrations of those gases can cause asphyxiation, and even just the weight of the cylinders alone, they can be very heavy themselves. So they could fall over and hurt somebody, or fall over, and if the valve were to break off, that's when you get that torpedo situation. And of course, if your compressed gas cylinders are involved in a fire and they get hot enough, then they can also explode that way as well. So there's a lot of hazards around a very common item that we use in industry. So care obviously should be taken when you're handling these cylinders, and be careful around the regulators and the valves. We'll go into that just a little bit more deeply here in the next few slides. And make sure that you're handling the hoses with care so that you're not developing any leaks, especially if you're doing hot work and you've got that flammable gas there next to you. Now, the contents of all compressed gases must be clearly identified on the cylinder itself. Identification should be stenciled or stamped on the cylinder, or contained on some sort of label that is there on the cylinder. So we should never be running into any situation where we've got an unlabeled, unidentified cylinder. So don't accept any cylinder that doesn't have its contents identified by name. If the labeling isn't clear, or if there's a tag on it that's not legible, then that cylinder needs to be marked as contents unknown and then returned to the supplier as soon as possible. And keep in mind that the color of a cylinder does not necessarily indicate the contents that are within that cylinder. And it says their color coding may not be reliable, as colors vary by the supplier. And it says their labels on caps should not be used to identify the contents of a cylinder, because those caps, of course, are interchangeable. And we need to post conspicuous signs in areas where flammable compressed gases are stored. And an example there would be hydrogen, flammable gas, no smoking, no open flames. So pretty obvious stuff there. And we always have to remember that gas cylinders have to be secured and stored upright at all times in order to prevent the tipping. And you can see in that picture in the upper right hand there, it looks like they've built some sort of a racking system for all of their tanks, and they've got the screw caps, the protective caps, in place while those cylinders are in storage. And here's another good example on how to handle and maneuver some of these compressed gas cylinders. A dolly like that is great for getting those things around very easily and very safely. And it looks like he's got a lip that will go under that tank, and then a strap to go around it to keep it secure, and he can just take it wherever he wants to. And it says there to never attempt to repair a cylinder or a valve. If you got any trouble like that, just go ahead and hand that off to the professionals and let them take care of it. And something I didn't know, it says here, normally right-handed threads are used for non-fuel gases, while left-handed threads are used for fuel gases. And so that's another way to help identify something. Maybe if you don't know exactly what it is, that'll kind of put you in the right direction, maybe. Alright, and we have to make sure that we place all cylinders so that the valve is accessible at all times, and that valve should be closed when the cylinder is no longer in use. Alright, we always want to make sure that we open these valves slowly, and then open the oxygen cylinder valves all the way. And then it says there to backseat the oxygen cylinder valve by opening slightly first until the needle on the high pressure gauge stops, and then open all the way. And then point the valve away from you and warn others nearby before opening any valve. Alright, flammable gas cylinders such as hydrogen and acetylene must not be stored close to open flames, obviously, or anywhere where sparks are generated, or near any other source of ignition. And it says there to never store acetylene cylinders on their sides. We don't store any cylinder on its side. It always needs to stay upright. There have been many cases where cylinders have been stored on their side without the protective valve cover, and then a forklift winds up shearing the valve off, and then that thing takes off like a torpedo. So that's obviously something that we want to avoid, because those can do a lot of damage once they get uncontrolled like that. And some more common sense type stuff: never use an open flame to detect leaks or flammable gases, leaks of flammable gases, and store cylinders containing flammable gases in well ventilated areas just in case there is a leak. It can ventilate. Let's see here. Oxygen cylinders and flammable gas cylinders need to be separated by at least 20 feet of open space, or by a firewall that's about 5 feet high and a fire rating of half an hour minimum. Every case that I've seen in industry, people just go by the 20-foot rule. So 20 feet of open space between your flammable gas and your oxygen is what is required by law. And keep in mind that regulators are gas specific and not necessarily interchangeable. So a lot of your regulators will say right on there what it's meant to regulate. So don't go switching regulators back and forth. And whenever your cylinders are empty, make sure that the valves are closed and that the system has been bled, but then of course close the valve. Remove the regulator, put the valve cap back in place, mark the cylinder as empty according to whatever your company's standard is, whether that's writing on it, empty, or a tag, or whatever that requires. And make sure the cylinder is returned to the storage area and put in its designated spot for the empty cylinders, and make sure you store those apart from the full cylinders. And whenever we're doing transport of any cylinders, of course, we don't want to walk the cylinder just with us and our hands. That's a good way to lose that cylinder because they are very awkward and very heavy to move. So always use some sort of a hand cart. But make sure the cover cap is screwed on hand tight and is to remain on the cylinder until it's ready for use or in storage. And cylinders should never be rolled or dragged. That should be pretty obvious. And like we said, strap them to a wheel cart and only handle one cylinder at a time. And that's pretty much the long and short of compressed gas safety. Thank you.